It was the summer of 2015 when my wife Emily and I moved into our dream home in the quiet town of Westfield, New Jersey. The house was a beautiful colonial-style property with a large backyard for our two young children to play in. We couldn't have been happier with our decision to start a new chapter in our lives in such a charming neighborhood. A few weeks after settling in, we received an unexpected letter in the mail. The envelope was plain and lacked a return address, but what truly caught our attention was the handwriting. It was elegant and old-fashioned, reminiscent of a bygone era. Intrigued, we opened the letter and began to read. The contents sent a chill down our spines. The letter was signed by someone who called themselves the Watcher. The writer claimed it was their duty to watch over our house and that they had been doing so for years. The letter went on to ask if we needed to fill the house with the young blood I requested. Emily and I exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to react to such an unnerving message. We tried to dismiss it as a prank by some neighborhood kids, but deep down we couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. As the weeks went by, more letters arrived, each one more unsettling than the last. The Watcher seemed to know details about our family that no stranger should have known. The names of our children, the hours we kept, even the layout of our home. We became increasingly paranoid, often catching ourselves peering out of our windows at the slightest sound, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Watcher. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Emily rushed into the kitchen, her face pale with fear. She held a letter in her trembling hands, the latest correspondence from the Watcher. This time, the letter contained a threat, warning us that if we didn't comply with the Watcher's wishes, they would ensure the house would never know peace. We had had enough. Fearful for the safety of our family, we decided to involve the authorities. The police investigated the matter, but despite their best efforts, they were unable to determine the identity of the Watcher. With no leads and no way to trace the letters, we were left with no choice but to try to move on with our lives. We eventually installed security cameras around our property, hoping that they would deter the Watcher or at least provide some evidence for the police. But the letters continued to arrive, and the constant fear and uncertainty took a toll on our family. Years have passed since we received that first letter, and though the frequency of the letters has diminished, we still occasionally find a chilling message in our mailbox. We've grown more resilient over time, but the lingering mystery of the Watcher continues to haunt us. We still live in the same house, now more determined than ever to reclaim our sense of safety and peace. But the question remains, who is the Watcher, and why have they chosen our family to terrorize? It's a mystery that may never be solved, leaving us forever wondering if the Watcher is still out there, keeping a watchful eye over our home. In the early 1980s, arcades were the epicenter of social life for many teenagers. That was no different for me and my group of friends. We spent countless hours immersed in the flashing lights and hypnotic sounds of our favorite games, eagerly competing for the highest scores. One day, a new arcade game appeared in our local hangout spot. It was called Polybius, and no one had ever seen or heard of it before. The game had an enigmatic allure, with its sleek black cabinet and minimalistic design. Intrigued, my friends and I decided to give it a try. As I approached the machine, I felt a strange sensation wash over me, like an electric current coursing through my veins. I inserted a coin and began to play, instantly captivated by the game's intricate patterns and hypnotic visuals. The longer I played, the more disoriented I became. My surroundings blurred and I lost all sense of time. When I finally stepped away from the machine, I realized that several hours had passed, and my friends had already left the arcade. As I stumbled out into the night, my mind was foggy and my memory of the evening was fragmented. I could barely recall what had happened during the time I spent playing Polybius. Over the next few days, I struggled with persistent headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of anxiety. My sleep was plagued by vivid nightmares, and I found myself inexplicably drawn back to the arcade. I was desperate to play Polybius again, as if the game held the answers to my worsening condition. My friends experienced similar symptoms, and rumors spread throughout the town about the mysterious arcade game. Some claimed that it was a cursed machine, while others whispered about government experiments and mind control. The arcade owner told us that every few days, a group of men in suits would visit the establishment, collecting data from the Polybius machine before disappearing without a word. As more people played Polybius, the strange incidents intensified. Players reported blackouts, memory loss, and even suicidal thoughts. It was as if the game had an insidious hold on our minds, burrowing deeper and deeper into our psyches with each passing day. In a matter of weeks, the Polybius machine vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The arcade owner claimed he had no idea where it had gone or who had taken it. With the game's disappearance, our symptoms slowly began to subside and life returned to normal. Years later, the legend of Polybius remained shrouded in mystery. Was it an elaborate hoax, a sinister government experiment, or something even darker? As the era of arcades faded into history, so did the chance of uncovering the truth behind Polybius. But sometimes in the darkest corners of my mind, I can still hear the haunting melody of the game. And I can't help but wonder if Polybius is still out there, waiting to claim its next victim. It was the summer of 2006, and my parents had decided to go away for the weekend, leaving me home alone for the first time. I was 16, and although I was thrilled at the prospect of having the house to myself, I couldn't shake the anxiety that crept in as night approached. My only source of comfort was my beloved dog, Daisy, a gentle and protective golden retriever. As I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I heard an odd dripping noise coming from the bathroom. The sound was unnerving, but I was too afraid to get up and investigate. Instead, I tried to ignore it and buried myself deeper under the covers. To ease my nerves, I reached down to pet Daisy, who was lying on the floor next to my bed. Feeling her warm tongue lick my hand provided a comforting sense of security. The dripping sound persisted throughout the night, preventing me from getting any real sleep. But each time I reached down to touch Daisy and felt her reassuring licks, I managed to calm myself enough to doze off for short periods. When morning finally arrived, I decided it was time to face my fears and find out what had caused the strange noise. With a deep breath, I opened the bathroom door, expecting to find a leaky faucet or a running shower head. But what I found was far more horrifying. Daisy lay lifeless on the bathroom floor, her fur matted with blood. I screamed in horror and disbelief, my legs buckling beneath me. As I sank to the floor, my eyes caught sight of a chilling message written in blood on the bathroom wall. Humans can lick hands too. Overwhelmed with grief and terror, I fumbled for my phone and called my parents, my voice breaking as I tried to explain the horrific scene before me. They rushed home immediately, and the police were called to investigate. The authorities discovered evidence of a break-in, and it quickly became clear that an intruder had been hiding in the bathroom, tormenting me throughout the night by imitating Daisy's comforting licks. The thought that someone had been so close, violating the sanctity of our home, sent shivers down my spine. Although the police searched tirelessly for the person responsible, they never found the monster who had taken Daisy from me and shattered my sense of security. The memory of that night still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder if the intruder is still out there, watching and waiting for another chance to strike. From that day on, I have never truly felt safe in my own home. The dripping sound that once seemed so innocuous now sends my heart racing in fear, and I can't help but remember the horrifying truth that humans can indeed lick hands too. I've always been a bit of a night owl, drawn to the serene stillness that settles over the world after dark. My favorite pastime was driving along the desolate back roads that wound through the dense forests surrounding our small town. It was a perfect escape from the daily grind and the best way to clear my head. One moonless night, as I drove through the darkness with only my headlights to guide me, I noticed a car parked on the side of the road in a secluded clearing. I knew the spot well. It was a popular destination for young couples seeking privacy. As I slowed down, I could see that the car was still occupied. For a moment, I hesitated, wondering if I should stop and make sure everything was okay. But something deep in my gut told me that something wasn't quite right. I decided to keep my distance and observe the scene from afar. As I watched from the shadows, my heart skipped a beat when I saw a figure emerge from the darkness, moving with a slow, deliberate gait. The figure appeared to have something metallic glinting in the dim light, and as it drew closer to the car, I realized with horror that it was a hook. My blood ran cold as I realized that I was witnessing the work of the infamous hook-handed killer, a serial killer who had been terrorizing our town for months. The figure approached the car, and I could see it raise the hook, preparing to strike. Just as the figure was about to attack, the car's engine roared to life. The couple inside must have heard the scraping sound of the hook against their door, and in a panic, they sped away, narrowly escaping the clutches of the killer. The figure stood there for a moment, staring at the retreating car, and then vanished into the darkness. With my heart pounding in my chest, I quickly started my own car and raced home, desperate to put as much distance between myself and the scene as possible. When I finally reached the safety of my house, I locked every door and window and called the police to report what I had witnessed. The police investigated the area where I had seen the hook-handed killer, but there was no trace of the murderous figure or any evidence of a struggle. The couple, still shaken from their terrifying encounter, had discovered the killer's hook lodged in their car door when they stopped at a gas station to inspect the damage. The hook-handed killer was never caught, and the legend grew, haunting our town for years to come. To this day, I can't shake the image of that night, the glint of the hook in the darkness, and the chilling knowledge that I had been a mere spectator to the work of a madman. Whenever I find myself driving alone at night, I can't help but glance in my rearview mirror, fearing the sight of a hooked figure emerging from the shadows. I had always been drawn to the beauty and mystery of the great outdoors, so when my best friend Jake suggested a trip to the Escalante Petrified Forest in Utah, I didn't hesitate to join him. We had both heard the local legend about the cursed petrified wood, but as rational adults, we dismissed the story as a mere cautionary tale meant to deter theft. Upon arriving at the park, we were awestruck by the breathtaking landscape with its colorful petrified logs scattered among the rugged cliffs and valleys. We spent hours exploring, documenting our adventure with photographs and sharing stories of our childhood escapades. As the sun began to set, we decided it was time to head back to our campsite. As we packed up our gear, I noticed Jake surreptitiously pocketing a small piece of petrified wood. I hesitated for a moment, remembering the legend, but decided not to say anything. After all, it was just a harmless piece of wood, and the curse was nothing more than a myth. Over the following weeks, however, a series of misfortunes seemed to plague Jake. He lost his job, his long-term relationship ended abruptly, and he was involved in a minor car accident. I couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection between these unfortunate events and the piece of petrified wood he had taken from the park. One day, while we were having lunch together, I decided to broach the subject. I asked Jake if he still had the piece of wood and whether he thought it might be responsible for his recent streak of bad luck. He laughed it off, dismissing my concerns as mere superstition, but I could see the uneasiness in his eyes. A few days later, I received a frantic call from Jake. He told me that he had been experiencing vivid nightmares and a growing sense of dread ever since he took the petrified wood. He finally believed that he was indeed cursed and wanted to return the wood to the forest as soon as possible. We planned a trip back to the Escalante Petrified Forest, determined to right the wrong and lift the curse. Upon arriving at the park, we retraced our steps to the spot where Jake had found the piece of wood. As he carefully placed it back, we both felt a sense of relief wash over us. Ever since then, he would not have nightmares anymore or bad luck. We both knew then that the myth was indeed true, even though we were not the kind of people to believe these sort of things. We had to this time.